Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. Today we have breaking news. Today we are covering the sentencing of Ruby Franke, 8 passengers, Mormon mommy, YouTube sensation Ruby Franke, and Connections coach, life coach, therapist Jodi Hildebrandt. Today was their sentencing. To cut to the chase, both of them have been sentenced to, I think, a minimum of 4 years in prison. So we're here to talk about that today. And as always, we are really honored to have with us back Lauren Mathias of Hidden True Crime Podcast. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, John. Honored to be here. Always an honor to collaborate with you.
And you're joining us from St. George, is that right?
Yes, joining you from St. George, Utah, where the sentencing took place. I had to travel here. I had to. Boots on the ground. It's in me. The journalist is in me. I got to be here.
I love it.
Here I am.
I love it. Well, we welcome our live streamed audience. I'm not dressed necessarily for a podcast, but Lauren reached out, and so thanks for your patience as we just do this extemporaneously. So Lauren, we've had you on before, but for those who are joining us for the first time or who are seeing you for the first time, why don't you tell everybody really quickly what Hidden True Crime Podcast is, just for those who don't know?
Absolutely. Hidden True Crime Podcast delves into the hidden motives of real crime stories. So what creates the person? My co-host is my husband, a forensic psychologist, Dr. John Mathias, who's holding down the fort right now at home while I'm traveling here. And John and I, Mormon Stories, John and I have been collaborating quite a lot because it turns out that a lot of criminals these days, at least in 2023, and victims as well, have been LDS. And it's such an important aspect to cover, and grateful to be collaborating with you and to talk about hard things. So thank you.
Absolutely. And for those who don't know, Lauren's kind of one of the world's experts in the Chad Deba, Lori Vallow case. And she covers she and her husband, John, cover many other cases as well. So before we get to today's, I don't know, is it called a hearing, sentencing hearing? Is that what it was called?
Mm-hmm. Sentencing. Yeah. Sentencing hearing.
Why don't we back up? I know there was some news. I think I saw some news about a statement Ruby's husband, Kevin, may have made yesterday about wanting her to get prison time. But for those who maybe have joined us for our collaborations together, why don't Lauren, you start by catching us up on any updates from our last meeting till now, if anything comes to mind, and if nothing's happened, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but if anything has happened in the past few weeks or months, why don't you catch us up on that first?
Thank you. Yeah. I will say that not too much has happened when it comes to last time you and I went live together and collaborated on this case. I actually think most of the updates have come from you. You've had more victims on that were Jodi Hildebrandt's victims or claimed that they were Jodi Hildebrandt's victims. So the last time you and I were on, we learned some really terrible details about the crime. They both took plea deals. And at those plea deals, we learned some of the horrendous torture, and those were the court's words, of these children, EF and RF, the victims, a 10-year-old girl, EF, and the 12-year-old boy, RF, that happened. We learned details of this, of everything they went through. Today in court, they refer to it as a concentration camp. So then they pretty much said at that plea deal or at that when they took the guilty plea, that they would both be sentenced on February 20th. And here we are. That date stayed. And that is what happened today. They both appeared, Ruby first, followed by Jodi. They both gave statements before the court. And it was really interesting what was said. There were differences between the two statements and differences between what the judge said about both of them.
And I've got those clips isolated, so we're going to play them. So we're definitely going to play those clips. So you were in the courtroom today, is that right?
I was not. So I came to be in the courtroom today. And then what happened is I reported for Law and Crime, and Law and Crime had an on scene reporter. So I reported during the sentencing. I was watching it live with Law and Crime and reporting for them for a couple of hours this morning. So I have yet to have breakfast. So I
Oh
need,
my goodness. Yeah. Thanks for your work.
but
Thanks so much for your work.
yeah.
Did you hear anything about Kevin telling the judge as recently as yesterday that he wanted his wife or ex-wife Ruby to get prison time? You know anything
Yeah,
about that?
it was a statement that he made through his attorney. And I can't, I can only tell you verbatim. I can't quote it, but it was through his attorney, and his attorney stated that Kevin Franke hopes that his wife is essentially held accountable, and that he did indeed want um, prison time for what she did to the victims, to their children.
And Kevin's filed for divorce. Is that right? I think we covered that previously.
That is correct. Kevin has filed for divorce, and I want to point out that they have been married a very long time. They met when Ruby was 18. They're college sweethearts. I believe it's been over 20 years of marriage, 5 children, and he has now filed for divorce. You're right.
Okay. And do we know any updates on custody in terms of whether he has yet obtained custody of the younger kids, and what if he hasn't obtained custody, what the relationship is? And I think there was at least one of our viewers that asks why Kevin wasn't charged as well. Any updates you want to provide around Kevin and the kids?
Yeah, one thing we learned in today's sentencing was that it seems like the kids are still the guardian of the state, has guardianship over the children. And I was actually surprised. I thought Kevin might be the guardian, but according to what they said in court today, it sounds like the state still has custody of the victims of the children. As far as Kevin not being charged, we can certainly all speculate about whether he was complicit, about what we saw on the YouTube channel 8 Passengers, how he supported his wife, how all these things. But the bottom line is, when it comes to the probable cause and the charging documents that police have put out, Ruby, Franke, and Jodi Hildebrandt are the ones responsible for they've each been charged with 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. And Kevin, during this time, was indeed living in Salt Lake City and not Southern Utah. So we can certainly all argue that he should be held accountable, or, we can all certainly have different opinions. But the bottom line is, when it comes to the charges presented and what happened to the children, Kevin Franke was not there during that time and the details that surround this case.
Okay. Thanks for that. I also think, just as a matter of update, it's worth mentioning the little TikTok video. I'm going to try and pull it up while you're kind of describing it a little bit, but a funny little TikTok video from Chad popped up this week. And as I'm trying to pull it up, do you want to just describe it really quick?
Yeah. And this is great too, because Chad was in court today. Chad Franke and Kevin Franke were both in court today for the sentencing. And Chad's been pretty quiet, like all of the Franke children sort of have. And this week, all of a sudden, Chad decided to come out with a TikTok, or his girlfriend did. It was posted originally to her TikTok profile, and then he shared it on his Instagram, which then you shared it with me, John, and I reposted it.
I'm going to show it. I'm going to show it right now.
Okay.
And then you can comment. I just found it. And this is just, I think this is somebody commenting on it, but it's the first thing that came up. So I haven't even screened this yet, but let's just go ahead and play it and see what happens. Tell me if you guys can't hear this.
Everyone's jaw drop. He just did a TikTok with his girlfriend where they make fun of the fact that his mom's in prison.
So this is a woman. It says, "Girlfriend, you'd love my mom." And then Chad Franke says, "My mom's in prison." And they're kind of,
his girlfriend Cameron first shared it to her
and I don't know
TikTok
why it
stories.
didn't. I didn't know why it didn't play the music there, but it's basically him doing a little dance jig, saying, "My mom's in prison." What'd you think about that? What'd you think about the dance jig, Lauren?
when you sent it to me, and you're right, the music does add. They have a nice little song to it, and they're both dancing to it. But when you sent it to me, I think what I responded to in your text, John, was there's Chad Franke living his best life and sort of owning what's happening with his mom. While his mom is about to be sentenced, today. It was about then. She's now been sentenced today. Chad Franke's living his best life and owning it. And at least, in my opinion, I think trying to make light of it is probably healthy. If you don't laugh, you cry. I applaud him for just sort of owning that and jumping in on social media and doing that with his girlfriend. I wish him the best.
All right. I'm going to try it one more time here. This time I think it's going to have audio. There we go. Okay, wait, let me show it again. Here we go. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. All right, yeah. So that got the point across. Okay, so those are a couple updates anyway. Anything else before we jump into today?
I think you covered it. We're seeing a few of the Franke children on social media coping. We're seeing Kevin Franke making statements through his attorney, and we've all been awaiting today.
All right. So what I've got now is the footage, is the coverage of what happened inside the courtroom today. Do you want to say anything else who was actually in the room? Other than, Chad being there, did you say Kevin was there? I may have missed that.
Kevin was there. Chad Franke was there, according to people that were there. That's what they told me. And then, Adam Paul Steed was there. Adam Paul Steed, who is a victim of Jodi Hildebrandt as well, he told me that the prosecutor invited him to come and sat him on the front row with his dad and family. So.
And I'll just say, for those of you who don't know, one of the most important interviews I've ever done, I think, is with Adam Paul Steed. And we received a cease and desist letter telling us that if we didn't take it down, we would be sued. And I'm really bummed. We don't have the money right now to fight multiple lawsuits. And so I regret that we had to take that down. Someday I hope to be able to put that back up, maybe in an edited form. But our love and our support goes out to Adam as a victim of Jodi Hildebrandt. And we regret that we had to take that down. But I'm so happy. And we've got a clip of Adam here as well, in addition to the interview he just did with you. If you want to hear an interview with Adam Paul Steed on Hidden True Crime just about an hour ago, make sure and check that out after you check this out. Okay. All right. So should we jump? What I have first is sort of Ruby coming in to the courtroom and the judge kicking off the sentencing hearing for Ruby. Should we start there?
Let's start there.
All right, let's do it.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to District Court. We're here for sentencing in the matter of State of Utah versus Ruby Franke. Ms. Franke is here with Mr. Windward. Mr. Clark and Mr. Sham are here for the State of Utah, and we are ready to proceed with sentencing.
And we're thankful to Law and Crime for this footage.
Counsel, the terms of the sentence were agreed to as part of the plea agreement, correct?
That is correct.
There is a pre-sentence investigation report in the matter. I have reviewed that. Everyone has seen it.
Yes.
What about restitution, counsel, before we move on with other matters?
We'd like to leave that open at this time, Your Honor.
Really quickly, can you explain to us what you know about this restitution question, Lauren? It's asked in both, and you may not know, you're not an attorney, but just in case you do.
Yeah, and it was a little bit fuzzy for me. It was a slow on my end, so I didn't completely hear what was being said by the judge. But if it was about restitution, are we referring to restitution for the victims? Maybe you can really recap and I can explain what it means.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll just keep playing and see what was said. But this is the judge asking about restitution. So
I can get into that. I might be more comfortable if we approach to get into that.
Is there an agreement that restitution, that we reserve that, and for what period of time?
8 months is what we're anticipating. But I haven't talked to the defendant's counsel about that.
We haven't discussed that, Your Honor.
Is there any objection?
No.
All right. What's the state's position regarding sentencing?
Your Honor, I'll stand up. The state respectfully requests that the court sentence Ms. Franke to consecutive prison terms for each of the 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. This sentence was agreed to by Ms. Franke in her plea agreement and is also recommended by Idaho Probation and Parole. She committed horrible acts of child abuse. From May to August in 2023, Ms. Franke and her business partner held her 2 children, ages 9 and 11, turning 12, in a concentration camp-like setting. The children were regularly denied food, water, beds to sleep in, and virtually all forms of entertainment. They were isolated from others and were hidden when people came to visit the house where the children and the defendants were staying. The children were forced to do physical tasks like carrying loaded boxes up and down stairs and wall sits or sitting against a wall without a chair or a stool for hours at a time. They were also forced to do manual labor outdoors in the extreme summer heat, at times without shoes or socks. They were forced to stand outside on a cement patio in the summer heat for hours and even days at a time. They were beaten, and the 12-year-old was regularly bound hand and foot after he attempted to run away in mid-July. Both children had extensive physical injuries from the abuse that required hospitalization when they were found. The injuries from the binding to the 12-year-old are particularly awful. In addition to physical abuse, the children were emotionally abused to the extent that each believed, to some degree, that they deserved what was being done to them. Had the older of the children not had the courage to run away and ask a neighbor to call the police, heaven only knows how much longer he could have survived in that situation. After being caught, Ms. Franke has shown considerable remorse, as evidenced by agreeing to serve consecutive prison terms and being willing to cooperate with the state against Ms. Hildebrandt. However, given the severity of the abuse she inflicted, consecutive terms are appropriate in this case. As the court's aware, Section 76-3401 lays out factors the court takes into account in determining whether consecutive or concurrent sentences should be imposed. Those factors are the gravity and circumstances of the offense, the number of victims, and the history, character, and rehabilitative needs of the defendant. As agreed to in the plea agreement and as recommended by Adult Probation and Parole, consecutive sentences are appropriate. This is due to the severity of the abuse to both victims. It could be argued that Ms. Franke should receive a lesser sentence than Ms. Hildebrandt because of her remorse and willingness to cooperate with the state. However, the Board of Pardons and Parole will have broad latitude and will be able to take those facts into account when it determines how long each of the co-defendants will remain incarcerated. In conclusion, we respectfully request that the court go along with what was agreed to in the plea agreement and is recommended by Adult Probation and Parole and impose consecutive sentences.
Thank you. Anything else from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, a little bit of legal gobbledygook there for those who aren't into that stuff. Lauren, do you want to kind of summarize, if you will, what we just heard, and then share any reactions you might have?
Yes, I'll share what we just heard. And then I do want to actually talk about the restitution too. I have some interesting things to say about that. So really what we're hearing is the prosecution laying out exactly what these children, these victims went through. We've been through this with the plea deal. When they took a plea, we heard these egregious, horrible details, and he's referring to them once again, that the 12-year-old was tied in the most horrendous ways. Hogtied is what, documents stated. They refer to the son. I thought it was interesting, the use of concentration camp. That's a new term we had not yet used. We have heard torture. We have heard some horrendous things, but this is the first time I've heard concentration camp. And I think that's an appropriate term here, that these children suffered immensely and that they believe that this was their fault as well, that these were their sins and that they brought this severe abuse onto them. The sweltering heat, let's remember just how hot the sun is in St. George, right by Las Vegas, Death Valley. working outside, having to do work day in and day out. And again, the 12-year-old being tied up, no food, no water, just going through what exactly these children suffered.
Yeah. I should have probably given a content warning about that, but that's and they reread most of that for Jodi Hildebrandt's sentencing as well. I cut off the beginning of it because it was repetitive, but I kept some of the end because he adds some stuff there. What can you explain people the conversation around consecutive versus, I guess, parallel sentencing and why that's important?
Yeah, so they've each originally the charges were 6 counts of aggravated child abuse. They were both originally charged with 6 counts. When they both took the plea deals, 2 counts were dropped, and they now both face 4 counts of aggravated child abuse, which are second-degree felonies in the state of Utah. So at that point, each count holds a certain number of years one can be, sentenced to in prison. So consecutive would mean, do you do those counts back to back, finish one, then go to the other, then hit the other, or do you serve them all at the same time? Almost. So they're saying, so consecutive would be a harsher sentence, in other words.
And because there are 4 counts that are remaining for each of them, and the minimum count is 1 year, it sounds like they're each likely to be sentenced for a minimum of 4 years each, maximum
Correct.
of what?
30. Maximum of 30, which is a little confusing. So if you do the math, it makes sense that the minimum would be 4 years each behind bars. And then if you do the math, it looks like it's going to be 60 years, which is what I originally thought, but I've learned because of Utah law, the maximum that they could serve behind bars is 30 years.
Okay.
Each.
And they're in their 40s or 50s, right? And so that would put them in their, I don't know, 70s to
Correct.
80s. Is that right?
Ruby is 41 years old, born in
Okay.
82, January 82. So that puts her at 41. And so that would be, she'd be in there until she was 70 if she got the maximum.
And then it sounds like the prosecutor was saying that it could be argued that Ruby deserves a lighter sentencing than Jodi. Is that what I heard?
Yes, that's exactly what you heard, which is really interesting. And I think that this was the trend throughout the entire sentencing. There were 2 sentencings, right? There was Ruby's, it was completely separate. And then following Ruby's sentencing, they then went into Jodi's. This wasn't one hearing. It was 2 separate hearings.
Yeah.
And there was definitely a trend of people, whether it was the prosecution, whether it was the judge, whether it was statements in court or after court in the press conference, that Jodi was more responsible, that Jodi was the therapist, that Jodi has been showing the least amount of remorse, that, so that Jodi is a risk. That's certainly something we saw throughout the day. And they definitely separated the 2 as far as risk factor and who is most responsible. And they certainly pointed the finger at Jodi today.
I'll just share a couple quick comments. We appreciate all the comments coming in. Linda asked, was Sherry Franke there? And then Twyla Reese responds, Sherry, Chad, and Kevin were all there. So thank you, Twyla.
Thank you, Twyla.
Do you confirm that? Is that your understanding as well, Lauren?
That makes sense. I had heard that Chad and Kevin were both there, and I wouldn't be surprised if Sherry was also there. So thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. And then Deborah writes, I believe Jodi deserves more time due to 1, being a professional, and 2, showing no remorse. And we'll get to that in just 1 second. Okay. Yeah. Everyone, thanks for Twyla also reminding everyone to please hit the like button, whether you're on Hidden True Crime live stream or Mormon Stories live stream on YouTube or on Facebook. Please subscribe to these channels. We always appreciate your becoming monthly donors to our shows, respectively, or your super chats. All of that is how we keep going. Okay, I think the next part is where Ruby is going to read her statement. I think that's what we have next.
Okay, so this is a big deal.
Anything else before we jump to that, Lauren?
I think we mostly talk about it after. I'm
Okay.
sure we'll all have a lot of things to say, but this
Okay.
was a big deal, a big part of today.
All right, here's Ruby's statement.
Windward.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. In my few comments this morning, and the comments my client wishes to make in a few minutes, we are not suggesting, nor are we asking that the court deviate from the stipulated sentence contained in the written plea agreement. I want the court to know that through introspection and reflection, Ruby Franke has become a serious student of her own actions. In the very early days of my involvement with Ruby, she was somewhat defensive, and she was still very much indoctrinated into a philosophy that was destructive. Fortunately, Ruby came to the stark realization of the errors in her thinking patterns and subsequent actions. To say that she was horrified by this realization would be to put it mildly. I have marveled at how quickly Ruby abandoned her defensive stance and moved toward her total acceptance of her actions and to her sentence today. So far, she has used her time in jail to unwrap the layers upon layers of deceit and deception foisted upon her over the last 4 years by an unscrupulous individual. Ruby realizes that she still has work to do in shedding those thinking errors and to reestablish a better and correct pattern of thinking and behavior. Ruby realizes that changing her thinking, reestablishing relationships, and healing are not simple or easy tasks. However, she is committed to doing that work. I would like the court to know that Ruby Franke is a delightful, respectful, and responsible person. She is open to feedback and addressing the consequences of her actions head on, and now ready to address your honor and accept your judgment. Thank you, Judge Walton.
Thank you. Ms. Franke has a statement she'd like to make.
She does.
Actually, I want to pause before we get to her statement and just respond to what we just heard. There's a lot of comments coming in. I'll just share one. S.L. Conley writes, I don't buy that she's totally taking responsibility. There are others that are basically saying, was she sorry when she was abusing the kids? But if I can just read my notes, they're saying no deviation from the plea agreement, that Ruby's been a serious student of her actions, that now she's claiming to have been indoctrinated. It's almost sounding like cult language. They're basically framing it as Jodi Hildebrandt is a cult leader and Ruby was indoctrinated into Jodi Hildebrandt's destructive cult, that once, even though she was defensive at first, once she woke up, she was horrified when she realized what she had done. Then she moved to acceptance. And again, they're calling her deceived, and that Jodi Hildebrandt was guilty of deceit and unscrupulous behavior. What do you think about that, Lauren? Or do you have anything to add there?
I concur. That's exactly how they're framing this. Whether you want to believe it or not is up to each of us, but they're certainly framing it. At least Ruby's attorney is, that she was a victim of not just Jodi, but I would say a cult or a cult mindset, that she was brainwashed, that she believed in something that, that she was in distortion, but not Jodi's kind. That she had a distorted sense of thinking. I actually did find it interesting how many times people use the word distorted today. But yeah, that this was Jodi's sort of mind warp on Ruby, and that she in many ways is a victim to her. That's certainly how they're framing it.
There's great comments coming in, not super Ruby friendly, but I'm gonna share a few of them. Solitaire Smith says she's only sorry she got caught, so not giving Ruby the benefit of the doubt there. I don't blame anyone for their reactions. Lisa Marie writes, Ruby was abusing her children on YouTube long before Jodi came along. Jodi wanted Ruby's 2 million followers. So, again, they're saying Ruby's abuse can't all be laid on Jodi. That's an important point to at least highlight. Kay Louise writes, Ruby is saying what she needs to say to get out of this mess. Well, it looks like she's not getting out of the mess, but I mean, maybe to minimize the ultimate sentence. I think that might be the play going on there. What do you think about that, Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, it is true. One of the biggest problems that Ruby has for herself, and I think it's fair to judge her because we saw her as a mother do some really cruel things to her children on her 8 Passengers YouTube channel. And I think that's going to be a really hard thing for much of the public to look past. Uh, Jodi wasn't around during those times. I mean, you could say that she was still under the influence of connections back then, or learning, because there were actually quite a few years that she and Kevin were involved in connections. But the bottom line is, I think a lot of people are going to harshly judge Ruby and not believe her apology, because of the abuse that was put on these victims. It's hard to imagine any mother being okay and being that brainwashed that you would do that to your own children. And B, we've seen cruelty of hers online on her YouTube channel. And many people also speculate, well, if she did that publicly, what was she doing behind the scenes? Clearly, we're learning. So that's what she has. That's hard for us to get past.
Yeah. And I'll just add that, and this is a sensitive thing that, clearly most faithful Mormons don't abuse their kids anywhere at all, let alone anywhere near this. I do think we've covered before that Jodi Hildebrandt certainly, and Ruby, were, number one, operating under a lot of what they perceived to be teachings, Mormon doctrine, end times teachings about the law of chastity and morality. And we know that Jodi Hildebrandt was frequently referred to couples and individuals and even youth by other Mormons or Mormon bishops or Mormon leaders. It would be interesting to see if any of their statements reflected something that actually touched on Orthodox Mormon doctrine and theology or practice, versus just putting it all on Jodi. Because I think Jodi built upon, if nothing else, unhealthy interpretations of Mormon doctrine and theology. What do you think about that,
Absolutely.
Lauren?
Absolutely. There was religious abuse involved and religious manipulation throughout this entire thing. I mean, just the fact that these 2 young victims believe that they were at fault and that they were possessed. I mean, it's sounding, you call me a Daybell expert. I can't help but see the similarities between JJ and Tylee, the victims in that case, 2 young children who were allegedly zombies or possessed. This clearly has a religious base to the abuse. And the fact that Ruby, I mean, let's say that she believed Jodi Hildebrandt. She believed then that children could be possessed. She believed that she had to have believed a lot of these religious aspects about an extremism of accountability, and that, this, I can't get over the fact that the 911 call, there's this sweet man who I've heard was home because he was sick, that RF ran to when he escaped Jodi Hildebrandt's house. On the 911 call, I've listened to it so many times. The man on the phone says, this young boy believes it was his fault. And you hear the 911 operator muffled under her voice speaking to herself going, oh, that's so sad. And I think that this absolutely has to do with my sins are my fault. This is my problem. I need to suffer. I need to show accountability. And I am a bad, evil person. And religion is at the base of this entire crime, or crimes, I should say, multiple counts.
Yeah. Yeah. So I hope that one thing this leads to is the Mormon Church clarifying its doctrines around end times, worthiness, law of chastity, and maybe even standards for therapists that are allowed to practice within the community, that are referred to by church leaders or the community, that are sometimes even subsidized by church finances. I hope this leads to kind of a cleaning up of mental health services and practices within Mormonism. I hope that's a positive outcome from all this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Agree.
All right, let's hear what Ruby has to say.
have to bend down then.
Okay, thank you. I would like to make a statement without any intent to change my stipulated sentence. For the past 4 years, I've chosen to follow counsel and guidance that has led me into a dark delusion. My distorted version of reality went largely unchecked as I would isolate from anyone who challenged me. I was led to believe that this world was an evil place, filled with cops who control, hospitals that injure, government agencies that brainwash, church leaders who lie and lust, husbands who refuse to protect, and children who need abused. My choice to believe and behave this paranoia culminated into criminal activity for which I stand before you today ready to take accountability. Jodi Hildebrandt was never my business partner, nor was I ever employed by her. I have never received wages from her or connections. Jodi was employed as my son's counselor in 2019, and in 2020 I paid her to be my mentor. It is important to me to demonstrate my remorse and regret without blame. I take full accountability for my choices, and it is my preference that I serve a prison sentence. Thank you to the officers in Santa Clara and the Ivan City Police, Nick Hellman, Brian Palufo, Cy Pickuvit, Mike Pondoyo in Tobler, John Ward, D. Lewis, and Chief Flowers. You were the angels who came and saved my children. I especially want to thank Detective Jay Bate. She plucked me out of a situation I didn't know how to get out of. And the moment she handcuffed me was the moment I gained my freedom. You were not the controlling ones. I was. Thank you to the medical staff at Intermountain Hospital. Your skill, tenderness, and professionalism helped heal my children. Jodi and I inflicted the injuries, not the hospital. Thank you to DCFS, the Children's Justice Center, Judge Basil, and other key adults. You've gathered my children under your wing and offered them love, compassion, encouragement. You were not the ones who were doing the brainwashing. Thank you to my Bishop Tom Hawks and my state president Jim Nilsson for reminding me of the Lord's love for the lost. So much pain and suffering would have been avoided had I followed and heeded your counsel. I was the one who was deceived, not you. Thank you to the Washington County Prosecutor's Office, Ryan Sham, the legal assistants and discovery clerks. Eric Clark, you exemplified to me how justice and mercy are meant to coexist. My charges are just. They offer safety to my family, accountability to the public, and they did show mercy to me. Thank you to my attorney, Lamar Winward, and his staff. I would not be where I am today without them. Thank you to Randy Kester for your limitless energy in healing my family. My dear friends, Pam and Roy, I'm so sorry for letting you down. Because of your association with me, your innocence was called into question. My mother-in-law, father-in-law, Kevin's family, my cousins, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and neighbors, you all saw the warning signs long before I did, and you did what you could. You wanted to help, but I pushed you away. My mother and father, I have been utterly wretched to you. You have offered me unconditional love, and for that I have offered you unconditional contempt. My siblings and their spouses, because of my decision to roll around in a pigsty, I have dragged your families through the mud in public. Yet, when I desired to return as a prodigal sister, unlike the prodigal's brother in the Bible, you synced step with my parents and ran out to greet me. Your capacity to love is unprecedented. Kevin, my husband of more than 23 years. You are the love of my life. I'm so sorry to leave to you to finish what we both started together. The ending of our marriage is a tragedy. And you are wrapped around my heart in a knot I'll never be able to undo. To my babies, my 6 little chicks, you were part of me. I was the mama duck who was consistently leading you to safety. I can see now, over the past 4 years, I was in a deep undercurrent that led us to danger. I remember launching into darkness knowingly. I was so disoriented, but I believed dark was light and light was wrong. I would do anything in this world for you. My willingness to sacrifice all for you was masterfully manipulated into something very ugly. I took from you all that was soft and safe and good. I took from you your mother. How terrifying this must have been for you. I will stop crying for hurting your tender souls. You're so precious to me. I'm sorry. My choice to live in fear of the world has created a great vulnerability and a blind spot for me, where I have broken hearts and I've caused people to suffer and I have betrayed sacred trust. Watching my community respond to my charges with justice and mercy and grace and love is all the more evidence to me how wrong I've been. This world is full of really good people. And finally, I'm sorry for twisting God's word and distorting his doctrines. My greatest desire is to stand in his court someday spotless and confident. And Judge Walton, I know that standing before you today is a necessary step towards that end. Thank you to you and your staff for facilitating my opportunity to take accountability and to answer for my charges. I am humbled and willing to serve a prison sentence as long as it takes to continue unraveling all of the misinformation I have believed and bought, swallowed, and acted out, and for my family to heal and for the community to heal. And I understand this is going to take time. I'm committed to continuing my learning until all of my toxic layers are shed, and I am ready to re-enter as a contributing member of our beautiful society. Thank you, Judge Walton.
Thank you for your statement, Ms. Franke. Anything else, Mr. Windward?
Wow. Okay.
Wow. Right.
That's a lot. I'll just say, okay, at the outset, I'm just going to share a quick reaction. Is that okay, Lauren?
Please.
Like, just the way I'm wired, I tend to trust people when they're expressing remorse or regret. My inclination is just like, it's sincere. You know what I mean? Having said that, I'm reading through the comments. People are so vicious, not vicious, but they're just skeptical. You know, Zero writes, are her pants on fire yet? Jane Ballard writes, the Ruby Franke show, that statement is total BS. Monica writes, not babies, you're cash cows. That's what they were and are to you. You know, somebody says, the Mo Porter writes, you're a part of me. That's so disgusting. It's so controlling. Fire Opal is mad that she called herself a mama duck and called the kids her chicks. Lamisa writes, this woman is dangerous. We've got Alan Zabriskie saying that these fake tears are like Mormon Apostle Henry B. Eyring. just on and on, super vicious stuff. And I would just say, I'll just say this. And I've gotten in trouble in the past for, showing any sympathy or empathy for Ruby Franke, for giving her any benefit of the doubt or credit for apologies or for contrition. But how would we know if she was sincere or not? And how can we know she's not truly contrite, that she's not sorry? Why isn't that a credible, heartfelt apology? I'll ask that theoretically, but now I'll just turn the time over to you to give your first reactions.
I like that. I'm going to ask this theoretically, but go ahead, Lauren. No, first off, I want to say thank you for humanizing someone. I think that you should never apologize, John, for giving people the benefit of the doubt or having empathy or sympathy for someone. We need more humanizing in this world. To our viewers right now who are angry, they are also rightfully angry. This is someone that hurt children, and adults are supposed to protect children, especially their mother. And it's heartbreaking and devastating to read what these children went through. So I have empathy for everyone and all the varying opinions and thoughts here. Separate from that, let me just put on my journalist hat and say simply, it's good that Ruby gave this statement. Whether we believe it or not, it was the right thing to do. And I think that's where maybe we can find common ground and all agree that there was no other way to give a statement but to say she is sorry and to say she has remorse, whether it's real or not. Thank goodness she gave that statement. I did appreciate other people who thought it sounded like she was at an Academy Awards giving an Oscar. I'd like to thank the police officers who arrested me, and I'd like to really thank those that, it was like a thanking thing. And it was a little odd at times, all of the thanking, but she, especially when you compare it to her co-defendant, I can say that with sincerity. And it doesn't even mean I feel sorry for her, but I can say with sincerity, I am so glad that this is the route she took and that she took the time to address the court and to say she is sorry, because that's the only thing she could do. Could she have done a better job? Maybe. Sure. But she did it. She said she was sorry, and I'm glad she did that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Really quickly, what are your thoughts around? I'm going to go through just some of the things she said.
Yeah,
I'm going to go in reverse order. What's that?
Okay. I said, yeah, there's a lot to unpack.
So she ended by talking about distorting God's words and doctrines. Something, I mean, people are complaining about how distorted the audio sounded. It was hard to hear a lot of the things she was saying, especially towards the end. But towards the end, she talked about distorting God's words and doctrines, and that she's hoping someday to stand before God and be forgiven. So I think that's where we're starting, because that's where she ended. This is basically a plea for religious forgiveness, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It shows just how religious she is, and how religious it is. And her way of thinking is very religious centered. And so it also shows, I think, how religion plays such a big part in these crimes. I found it interesting that she's still using the word distorted, right? I so often want to know, she used it so many times. I'm like, are you doing this on purpose? Or is that just your lingo to use the word distortion, which is Jodi's way of saying you're living in distortion. You're living in distortion. It's this brand word for connection. And for Jodi Hildebrandt to use it in her sentencing, I thought was really, I don't even know if, I guess I did think it was a little peculiar. It left me curious. Was that on purpose, or is that just simply a word that she knows well now? And so it's part of her lingo. So to say that she was in distortion with Jodi Hildebrandt, and distorted God's laws and God's, it's hard to, I mean, I wish she could just simply say, this is where I have a hard time. Her own moral compass. That's what worries me about Ruby Franke, if I'm going to be really honest, is um, I don't know if you need God to have a moral compass, right? If God helps you to live a better life, then great. But it would be nice to hear a little bit more about how she realizes that what she did was just really, really bad because of her own integrity and these feelings inside of her. But she does frame everything in this sort of religious. It teaches you a lot about how Ruby Franke thinks. But hey, if that's how she views the world, then she's using religion to apologize to. I get it, but I wish that we'd hear more of just a basic moral compass. Sorry, too.
And I'll say stuff I've said before, but you know, she calls it the distortion of God's word and his doctrines and his teachings. But we all know from the Mormon context, the Book of Mormon calls sexual transgression next to murder in severity. That feels like a distortion in the modern world. We just interviewed a really important Mormon Stories interviewee that was reportedly kidnapped and taken to a troubled teen center, and by her account was abducted and was mistreated in very severe ways. Her only crime was having premarital sex with her long-term boyfriend. But her parents, her Mormon parents, had her basically sequestered her and submitted her to this troubled teen center for months because in their minds, she had committed the sin next to murder by having sex with her boyfriend. And I bring that up not to derail, but because Jodi Hildebrandt is not the only Mormon therapist along the Wasatch Front or anywhere that encouraged severe treatment of teens and adults for anything that comes close to what the Mormon Church would deem as sexual transgression. And that's a distortion that is not dependent on Jodi Hildebrandt, that is ubiquitous amongst Mormon culture in 2024, that I personally would love to see called out. And it just seemed, I was disappointed and I didn't expect it, because who's going to turn on their host religious culture, especially in a moment of distortion, in a moment of like contrition. You can't expect Ruby to say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints distorted teachings around sex and sexuality and forgiveness and repentance are the core problem here. I guess part of, not to hate on the church, but that's what I wish that would have been included.
Yeah, no, thank you for calling that out. I appreciate you saying that and calling it out. I also want to point out, that God should never, ever be in therapy. And this is one reason. It is so easy to religiously abuse people or to use God, and if God's laws can be so easily twisted, then maybe, again, we should stick to just what we know to be right and good and use more, logic in our inner thoughts and emotions to understand that. I thank you for calling that out, John. And there is a big reach now, with people trying to bring God back into therapy, and it's really disturbing to me.
Yeah, that shouldn't be there. Really quickly, were you repulsed by this idea of her calling herself Mama Duck and her kids chicks? Like, in my mind, that might have been like how she talked to her kids, and she was basically highlighting how it seemed like she used to think of herself that way as a Mama Duck protecting her chicks, but that she dropped the ball severely. Was that tone deaf or inappropriate in your mind for her to invoke that metaphor in this context?
No, if she's speaking to her family and they understand what she's trying to say, who am I to judge? I think that I understand, again, why it was so hard for people to hear. We think of, again, a mama duck as someone that protects her baby chicks. And so I understand why it's going to trigger a lot of people here, especially mothers. But we don't know, right? We don't know her intention or who she was necessarily trying to speak to.
Yeah.
With using that term.
What did you think about her talking about Kevin as the love of her life for 23 years, that he remains wrapped around her heart? That clearly sounds like she still loves Kevin, regrets allowing Jodi to separate her and Kevin, and would welcome not getting divorced from Kevin.
Yeah. That was sad because I heard from people sitting in court that actually Kevin was crying during that moment.
Oh, wow.
And that's what made that very sad and very heartbreaking. Again, let's remember they are college sweethearts. They met when Ruby was 18 years old. I don't know exactly. Maybe Kevin was 21. They've been together over 20 years. And
6 kids, right? 6 kids, yeah.
5. Yeah. And, or yeah, you're right. Gosh. And so so that alone makes it heartbreaking to know that her other half, the person that just filed for divorce, was crying in the courtroom, made
Yeah.
it difficult to know. Yeah.
We've covered a bit, her whole family are kind of Mormon influencers, including her parents that are on a mission, or at least were. All of her siblings at one point or another have had successful YouTube channels. And this has clearly been hard on her parents and siblings. And so I was grateful to hear her admit that she was wretched. She said the words utterly wretched to her parents, and that she forced her siblings and their spouses to roll around in a pigsty. Like, I don't know, that feels like contrition to me. Like,
Unconditional contempt. She said that she showed her parents unconditional contempt. That was pretty powerful.
yeah.
Yeah.
So based on what I've seen, I'm guessing they appreciated that. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
I thought and maybe I'm jumping ahead. Forgive me, John,
No,
if
go
I
ahead.
am, but
Go ahead, jump.
I want to point out that she said that it was her paranoia that led to criminal activity. You probably have that written down. So again, sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but that she was paranoid, that she thought the world was bad. We see so much paranoia in this world, and with LDS preppers, I'll say it, you don't have to. I see a lot of paranoia, and I think that's coming from a place that's been studying the Daybell case for a very long time and has attended these sort of conferences. And I know that Jodi Hildebrandt is a big part of this sort of prepper community in the LDS church. I would call it a subgroup of the church, and these extremist preppers. And that, Jodi Hildebrandt, I think, was quite a prepper. She had this basement in this southern Utah home. And, according to Jesse, in your interview with Jesse, that she was preparing, that she thought she was going to usher in the second coming of Christ. That was from Jodi's niece, Jessie, on Mormon Stories, that incredible interview you did with her, John. And excuse me, them. I'm working on that you did with Jessie. And so to hear about paranoia and that her paranoia led to these crimes was actually a little bit chilling to me, if I'm going to be honest, because I always say that there is still danger out there. There is still danger out there. And for her to claim that a paranoia led to criminal activities says something that I think we should all be paying attention to.
Yeah, we've covered this as well, whether it's the the Visions of Glory, Tom Harrison, Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, Tim Ballard, just kind of Mormon prepper movement out there. That's what it gave. That's the vibes that I got when she talks about the world is evil. That's second coming, Mormon prepper, mumbo jumbo, being isolated, that the cops are in control, that hospitals injure. That's the whole anti-vax, suspicion of science, suspicion of medicine garbage that has taken over a huge chunk of Utah, Idaho, and Arizona Mormon culture, that cops control, that the government does bad things. What did you think about the line that church leaders lie and lust? It was clear that she was quoting Jodi Hildebrandt. So it must have been Jodi Hildebrandt's teachings that Mormon church leaders lie and lust, which is weird because so much of Jodi Hildebrandt's teachings were built on Mormonism.
Oh, no, I'm not surprised. And this is such a big deal. Thank you for bringing this up. How do you be a leader of a religion if there are other leaders? If you want to be a true cult leader and lead the people and have them listen to you and no one else, you better scare them of the actual leaders. there are so many of these subgroups that start with the idea that the LDS leaders or the church leaders are being led astray. Chad Daybell had a train dream where he saw that the LDS leaders were being led astray. I've attended a firm expo, and while I met wonderful people there, there is definitely an idea from many of the people that church leaders are being led astray. So for if Jodi Hildebrandt truly is a cult leader, which is again what it surely seems like Ruby's attorney is trying to set the stage and say, then she would certainly try to make Ruby afraid of everyone but her. And that she has the truth with a capital T, as Jodi would say. I've read Jodi's book, and she, by the way, I don't know if you know that she says it's truth with a capital T.
Yeah.
She has that.
Absolutely.
And so if you are going to be stating that, then you better be the authority. And so for Jodi to be saying, oh, the church leaders don't know, I know, it kind of does show that, yeah, that she is leading a cult, and she's trying to establish herself as the leader.
But for me, it goes deeper just because as we talked about with Tom Harrison, with Visions of Glory, with Tim Ballard, this whole Mormon prepper subculture does have this kind of non-public line that somehow the Mormon church leaders have gone astray. It's kind of the Denver snuffer, you know, the restoration needs another restoration, that the restoration from the apostasy has gone back into apostasy, and that it's these independent conservative prepper Mormons in Arizona, Idaho, and Utah that are the one mighty and strong. Again, Avram Gileadi and his teachings from Isaiah. It's got all those vibes there of this paranoia, end times, can't trust the church leaders. But I think I'll just close this part with just my continued call to the Mormon church to clean this up, because the church knows how to deal with apostates. This is apostate language, and the church excommunicates apostates. Why isn't the Mormon church excommunicating Tom Harrison, Avram Gileadi, all the leaders of these end times prepper movements? Because otherwise they're just letting them fester and grow. And as you and I and others have pointed out, this won't be the end, right? This won't be the end. Jodi Hildebrandt and Chad and Lori Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, it's not over, right?
Blaise Thibodeau. No, it's not over. What you just brought up is so important. Let me say this, that you are so used, John, to, we're so used to Mormon Stories being the place for progressive Mormons or those that are realizing and believing that LDS leaders are full of it, right? But what people aren't realizing is actually those really staunch believers, or the Jodi Hildebrandts, or the people that are saying you have to live this severely black and white way of thinking, and the ultra conservative stalwart members are the ones that are stating, oh no, the LDS leaders are just falling away. Don't believe them. We need to go start our own little subgroup, and we need to preach our own little thing. And they're creating their own little culture that is very, and I'm going to say it, you don't have to, dangerous. That's very dangerous. And I think that's maybe fair to say, because we've got Tim Ballard, we've got Jodi Hildebrandt, we have the Daybell. So I think I can say that. And so I think sometimes we give so much attention to, one side of the coin that we're not focused on the other side. And so thank you for tackling this and bringing this up. Thank you. It's a very strange phenomenon that we're seeing, that the LDS leaders, the most stalwart leaders that you would think would be the most righteous, to use lack of a better word, that's their term, righteous followers of the LDS prophet and follow everything to a book, are actually saying, no, LDS leaders actually don't, they're falling away. And so we've got to do our own thing here. And they're not listening to LDS leaders. They're listening. They're starting their own little subgroups. I don't know how to explain it. I'm talking, but thank you.
Krista from your channel's calling me out. She says, I thought you were against excommunication. I will say, I'm against excommunication for people who advocate for LGBT rights, who advocate for women's rights, who advocate against racism, who advocate for more financial disclosure on the part of the church, more financial transparency, who advocate for truthful telling of history. I think it's wrong to excommunicate those people. For legal same-sex married couples, I do think that any organization has the right to decide who's a member and who's not. I don't think I'm against excommunication for pedophilia. I don't think I'm against excommunication for rape or incest, for spousal abuse. And honestly, I don't think I'm against excommunication for end times, paranoid, illegal, violent strains of apostasy. I don't know how else the church can police its boundaries, because if you have no boundaries, you're not a people. You're not a community with no boundaries. So I don't know if that makes me a hypocrite, but I don't think I'm against excommunication for illegal behavior. Or
yeah. And they didn't ask me, but I'll throw in my opinion. I am against excommunication, and I'll tell you why. But I'm against excommunication because I think that actually that makes those that are LDS sometimes a little bit more gullible. If you see an LDS member in high standing, you trust them. Well, they haven't been excommunicated. I must trust them. I think we should actually go by the whole once you're LDS, you're always LDS stance. But I will say this, the church leaders don't agree with me, and they do excommunicate. And so now I find myself very concerned with, my gosh, my goodness, if you do excommunicate, and then we need to excommunicate people that are dangerous and that are concerning and that might be leading innocent, vulnerable people astray. If we're going to excommunicate, then we have to protect vulnerable people, and that would be excommunicating the right people.
Yeah. All right. The only other thing I'll add, we got to jump to the next clip, but she wanted to really make a point that she never received any money from her partnership with Jodi, and that she paid Jodi to be her mentor, and it seems like she takes issue with the idea that they were business partners, and that's weird because they were doing videos together and promoting a business together. I guess she just wanted to make the point that she never got any money out of the deal. But did you find that to be interesting?
I found it actually to be a really interesting piece of the puzzle. It would actually make Jodi, in my opinion, be a bit more of a user. If she's saying, no, we were business partners and I was actually paying for therapy, then I actually think it makes Jodi look even worse. Wait, you were making this woman pay you while using her channel and her platform and her children, and who knows what else.
Yeah,
and
right.
that she was still paying you.
Yeah.
I actually think it makes it look worse. I've got to bring up something, John, before we move on.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to bring up about her statement first?
Yeah. I mean, just when she mentions as a delusion of hers that husbands don't protect children and that children are abused by husbands, that just screamed Adam Paul Steed. And it made me feel sorry for Adam Paul Steed and the other largely male husband victims of Jodi Hildebrandt. That's the only other thing I wanted to mention. Go ahead.
Yeah, and not so daring devastating. She's saying we weren't business partners, we weren't equal. This was her in power, I think.
Yeah, and it's unethical for therapists and coaches to be employing their clients, really, generally speaking. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you want to say?
I'm pulling up my phone notes because I got to get this right. So forgive me. I have this all written down. I've got to be a really, really good journalist when it comes to this, because I want to point something out. And this hasn't been shared on other channels, and I haven't talked about this, but I think most of us know, she says, this is in quote at her statement, "My dear friends, Pam and Roy, I'm so sorry for letting you down. Because of your association with me, your innocence was called into question." End quote. Now, many people know who she's likely talking about. She's referring to Pam Botcher. Pam Botcher was a really good friend of Jodi and Ruby's. And let me tell you a little bit about Pam, because She's apologizing to them, her dear friends. They're also in the body cam footage. So do you remember, John, when the children were found in southern Utah in Ivins, they needed to find the other minor children of Ruby and Kevin's. I don't know if you recall that. And so they were found up north at Pam Botcher's home. And you have body cam footage of both. Okay, so that's Pam and Roy. Okay, so Ruby is apologizing to them. Well, let's go back. I have this written down. Jodi Hildebrandt, the niece of Jodi, in your interview with them, states this: Pam Botcher, when I was living with Jodi, so this is a quote from Jesse on your interview. Pam Botcher, when I was living with Jodi, Pam Botcher was around. She was Jodi's best friend, Jesse said, and then quotes, I didn't realize that she, Pam, was connected in this. I mean, I have very strong feelings towards Pam because of, not that she was directly applying abuse, like she wasn't exactly involved, but she was one of the people that was constantly surveilling the surveillance and reporting back to Jodi. That's from Jesse. Here's some other things about Pam. Pam is the president of the Connections Foundation. And then let's get back to restitution, John. Restitution, you asked about that and I couldn't hear. So Jodi is now selling her $3 million home in Kayenta, and which we're like, oh, she's going to have a bunch of cash. And Kevin Franke has actually filed something to be able to receive some of that home or some money for restitution for the victims, because these children are going to need therapy for the rest of their lives. And if Jodi has a $3 million home, certainly some of it, I think many of us could agree that should go to the victims, RF and EF, and those, affected by Jodi. Well, in that filing, Kevin Franke states this. So Kevin Franke's saying, come on, she's got this $3 million home. Let me read to you this. The defendant, he states, here we go. The property has not been taken for tax assessment or fine. Pause. Let me find the right place. Okay, so more importantly, the defendant, Jodi Hildebrandt, presently has resources from which this restitution could be funded, but such may not soon be the case, and the resources may be liquidated and unavailable for access should the court fail to immediately delay or prevent the liquidation or transfer. They're referring to this $3 million home. The defendant would suffer no prejudice by the short delay. Under the Crime Victims Restitution Act, these child victims are entitled to restitution, which will compensate for these injuries by the way the defendant providing restitution for any and all ongoing treatment of these injuries. So in other words, we need the funds from this home. And then it is stated, this is wild, that one of the concerns is that the money to Jodi's house is either in the name of the defendant, Jodi Hildebrandt, or it's being held by third parties or entities for the defendant that may include, but not limited to, Pam Botcher and Connections LLC. So I just want to point that out because I think it's really interesting that Pam Botcher's been involved with Jodi since Jodi Hildebrandt was living with Jodi and is the president of the Connections Foundation. And Ruby is apologizing to Pam in this statement. What does that mean? I have no conclusion, but I want to point out that caught my attention, and we should all know who Pam is and how involved she's been in Jodi's life for a long time. I'm not putting anything on Pam. I don't know what she knows. I'm just laying out those few facts. It was really interesting to me that she would apologize to Pam. I don't know what that means.
Interesting. All right. Well, you have good instincts, so I'm excited to see what comes of that. Thank you for sharing. Let's go ahead and go to the next clip. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. Let's do it.
No, Your Honor.
Anything else prior to the court imposing sentence?
So this is the sentencing.
No, Your Honor.
The sentence will be that Ms. Franke serve 4 counts, 4 1 to 15 year sentences based on her convictions for 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. Again, they will be served consecutively pursuant to the parties' agreement and the applicable statute. Under the applicable statute, the court finds that that consecutive sentences are appropriate. Ms. Franke, the last thing I do need to tell you is that you have only 30 days to file or to perfect an appeal of any errors of the court by filing a written notice of appeal with the clerk of the court. If you don't do that within 30 days, you will lose your right to appeal. You also have the right to the assistance of an attorney on appeal and to have one appointed if you cannot afford to hire your own. Restitution, as agreed by the parties, will remain open for a period of 8 months. Any of the parties can bring that matter back before the court within that period of time. Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right. So that's the
The
sentencing.
next matter before the court is State of Utah versus Hill.
So that's basically the sentencing. She got minimum of 4 years. Do you know, can you tell us really quickly, you may have already touched on this, how is the final sentencing going to happen? How it will be arrived at, exactly what the minimum sentencing is?
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually had a defense attorney on my channel earlier today to help explain that to me, because even I was confused and needed a legal expert. But it sounds like what's going to happen is it will be decided through the Board of Pardons. Is that right? Everyone correct me if I don't have that right. So it's interesting that they were sentenced, and the major thing we learned today, essentially, that it's going to be consecutive. But as far as, which is good. But as far as how long they will each serve, will not be up to the judge, but will be up to the board, and they will decide. And I think they will look at all mitigating factors, including what the judge laid out. That, well, we'll get to that. That's a Jodi thing. But in other words, they'll look at how risk factors, and they'll look at how, I think they'll definitely look at Ruby's remorse, or her act of remorse, to be fair, whatever it is, to give everyone a voice here. And they will decide what she will serve, but it will be at least 4 years. Technically, it might have been parole today, but it's not going to be. It's going to be 4 years at least.
And do we know when you may have already said this, when that final decision will be made?
I don't.
Okay.
I wish I could tell you. That's one thing I don't know. Sorry.
Okay. So that'll be another episode.
We'll be going live when it happens.
Okay. So the next part we're going to play is kind of the same thing we just saw. Ruby leaves the courtroom. Jodi Hildebrandt enters the courtroom. I've abbreviated some of it. There's going to be a part where the judge reads how the kids were abused again. I cut off a good chunk of that's repetitive, but I kept the ending because he says some things towards the end of the description, not the judge, but the prosecuting attorney, that I think is relevant. So let's go ahead and jump to the Jodi Hildebrandt sentencing.
At a time. They were forced to do manual labor outdoors in the extreme summer heat, often without shoes.
So this
or
is
socks.
Jodi.
They were also forced to stand outside on a cement patio in the summer heat for hours and even days. They were beaten, and the 12-year-old was regularly bound hand and foot after he attempted to run away in mid-July. Both children had extensive physical injuries from the abuse that required hospitalization to treat. The injuries from the binding are particularly bad. In addition to the physical abuse, the children were emotionally abused. They each believed to some degree that they deserved what was being done to them. Had the older of the two children not had the courage to run away and ask a neighbor to call the police, heaven only knows how much longer he could have survived. After being caught, Ms. Hildebrandt has shown little to no remorse for her actions. In telephone conversations that will be provided in full to the Board of Pardons and Parole, and which she knew to be recorded, she's repeatedly claimed that she is the victim and the children are the perpetrators. She has gone so far as to say that the things said in this proceeding and covered by the media today will be full of lies. The combination of three factors make Ms. Hildebrandt a significant threat to the community. First, the severity of the abuse she caused to be inflicted on young children. Second, her attitude that everything she did was justified and that she is being wrongfully imprisoned. And third, her training as a therapist and aptitude for using online resources to convince others to follow her guidance. Utah Code Section 76-3401 lays out 3 factors the court should consider in determining whether to impose concurrent or consecutive sentences. The first is the gravity and circumstances of the offense. The second is the number of victims. And the third is the history, character, and rehabilitative need of the defendant. As agreed to in the plea agreement and as recommended by adult probation and parole, consecutive sentences are appropriate here. This is due to the severity of the abuse to the 2 victims and the extreme need for Ms. Hildebrandt to be rehabilitated so that she no longer will present a risk to the community. The state respectfully requests that she be sentenced to 4 consecutive terms.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Mr. Terry?
Thank you, Your Honor. I will be brief. As is always the case in cases that come before courts, there are 2 sides to every case, and and even in a case like this, that remains the case. There are many allegations regarding these 2 individuals, Ms. Franke and my client, Ms. Hildebrandt. The only facts in this case that are adjudicated facts are those set forth in the plea agreement that she entered into freely and knowingly and voluntarily. Those facts, those adjudicated facts, are significant. They certainly provide a basis for the pleas and provide a basis for the stipulated sentence in this case. My experience with Ms. Hildebrandt is that she is not the person that she has been portrayed to be. But having said that, she has accepted responsibility in this case. She has entered into this plea agreement with a stipulated sentence of 4 consecutive sentences. She did that at the time she entered into the plea agreement knowing that that would be the court's order. She is before the court today knowing that that will be the court's order, and she fully accepts that. She accepts responsibility and she accepts the consequences for her conduct. And we will submit it to the court on the stipulated agreement.
Mr. Terry, you suggested that there are 2 sides to every case. I generally agree with you. Ms. Hildebrandt didn't make a statement to AP&P in the course of the pre-sentence investigation report.
Correct.
Why did she not make a statement?
She wanted to reserve her right to make a statement before the court today, and she has a brief statement that she wants to read, Your Honor.
Okay.
And
all right. Ms. Hildebrandt? Go ahead.
I sincerely love these children. I desire for them to heal physically and emotionally. One of the reasons I did not go to trial is that I did not want them to emotionally relive the experience which would have been detrimental to them. My hope and prayer is that they will heal and move forward to have beautiful lives. I am willing to submit to what the state feels would be an appropriate amount of time served to make retribution as an outcome.
And in answer to your question, Your Honor, I knew that whatever she might say to the author of the pre-sentence report would probably sound hollow and self-serving, and perhaps it does today. But I know that my client, in the statement that she makes to the court today, that statement is absolutely sincere.
Does Hildebrandt recognize that it's her behavior that caused the harm to the children that she's referred to in her statement?
Your Honor, she recognizes that she was, along with Miss Franke, that she made decisions with respect to the discipline of those children that were wrong, that caused harm to those children. She fully recognizes that and accepts responsibility for that.
All right. Anything else?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right. That was disturbing. That was the first time I
Thank you.
watched that whole clip. Wow. Why don't you go first? But I've got a bunch of stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, this is the part where I give no sympathy, no empathy. This is actually the most maddening thing about today for me was Jodi Hildebrandt's statement. She did not say she was sorry. She did not take responsibility. She starts by saying, I love these children deeply. I mean, if the duck thing upset people, this one has me fuming to say that she loves these children. And then she says that she hopes that they heal. And that's it. And then she says, I wish them the best life. She doesn't say, and by the way, this is my belief system. She doesn't say, and by the way, this is my fault. By the way, I abused them. She doesn't say she's sorry. Not once does she say the words, I'm sorry. If you want to know who Jodi Hildebrandt is, listen to her statement and you will know my opinion.
Yeah. She had a blank face. There were like no facial reactions. It looked like she was thinking, but I didn't see any sign of really feeling or of feeling remorse. I just didn't see it. He talked about phone recordings where she said she's the victim, which maps with her affect during this healing, that she said that the children are the perpetrators. How could she say that she loves the children when she's on record calling them the perpetrators and saying that they're full of lies?
Well, it reminds me of people that abuse that say, I do this because I love you. I love you, which is why I'm hurting you. My grandmother was abused and that's what her abuser said, it's just because I love you. I mean, to me, it was sick. She was to say that you love somebody as you hurt them is the cruelest form of abuse, it's just despicable. I have no empathy or sympathy for her.
Yeah.
After seeing that.
I'll share just a couple of the comments just to kind of give a sampling of our audience. La Misa Filipino Food Club writes, similar to Lori Daybell, this woman is violent, dangerous, but more so because she actually believes some of her own BS. So that's a parallel that many people have drawn. They're likening Jodi Hildebrandt's response to Lori Vallow, who was more defiant and was justifying that God and Jesus were all okay with the outcomes of those children being murdered. It was just like, hey, God, I'm good with God. Everything happened as it should. And that's almost the vibe that Jodi Hildebrandt was giving. Is that projecting too much onto Jodi?
I don't think it's projecting too much. I think when you're looking at risk factors, it's equal. They both believe the BS, as Lamisa says. They both believe this. I actually think Jodi is worse because I think with I shouldn't say worse. Lori, I feel like Lori, you just want to like facepalm, like you can't believe she's saying this stuff and it's horrible and lock her away forever because she's such a risk factor. She still believes this. And as Judge Boyce said to Lori Vallow Daybell during her sentencing, you've gone down a religious rabbit hole and you haven't come back up. You're still down there. With Jodi, it almost feels like she's more manipulative. Like she believes her own BS, but she's not daring to say it. She's just trying to say, I love these kids. I love them. I wish them a wonderful life. I'm a good person. And with the way I see her face, just, like looking kind of stressed and nervous, I almost feel like she is trying to put that victim face on, like, oh, I'm just this afraid child. I don't know what to do. Help me. Sorry. This is me. Like, I just took off my journalist hat and I'm going, full on my opinions on Jodi Hildebrandt. But this is Lauren's opinions. There you go. Me.
No, that's good. I'll add that in addition to her not apologizing and saying she loves the kids, which feels very abusive, it's kind of like they're saying that she submitted. This is how I interpreted it. She thinks she's innocent, but for the sake of the kids, she didn't want to drag the kids through a court. And so she submitted innocently like a lamb to the slaughter. There's some Mormon overtones to that for the sake of the kids. And then even though she didn't say she was innocent, when asked to give a statement of contrition, she didn't. But then the attorney immediately steps in and calls these things allegations, says there are two sides, says that the only adjudicated facts were in the plea agreement, that Jodi is not the person portrayed. And he's saying she accepts responsibility, but she's not saying she accepts responsibility.
Right. It's a big difference to have your attorney say it and you say it. And this is the time she should say
That's
it. And
so
I think that was pretty
off.
obvious.
What is she like? I mean, I guess she just literally doesn't accept responsibility. But then it's
No,
weird that
she
the
doesn't.
attorney is saying she does, right?
No, he's being a defense attorney. He knows. He's like, yeah, she didn't accept responsibility, so I'll just say she does. You know, but I think
Because that's
everyone
his
can see
job
through
to
it.
lie for his client. Like, that's weird.
I mean, you could debate whether or not it's a lie if he feels that that's her way of saying she takes responsibility, that he's not necessarily lying, but she's clearly not. And I agree. She's going into this like she's a martyr. Oh, I've taken a plea deal so that the kids will not, so they'll be safe. Right. Martyr is, I do. She's trying to play the martyr. And that's what she's done well her whole life, according to Jesse.
Yeah.
When you interviewed them.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the judge jumps right on it and says, look, she had a chance to make a statement before. Why didn't she make it? And then the attorney's like, well, she wanted to wait and make it today. And then when she makes it, there's no contrition or anything. She sounded like her voice was a little bit trembling, but certainly not crying, and certainly didn't sound remorseful to me.
No, I think her trembling voice was to act afraid, like meek, that she's the victim. I mean, that's what they say, that she always wants to be the victim, which, by the way, John, I know you don't cover true crime all the time. So let me just tell you this. There's a book called The Sociopath Next Door. And in that book, Dr. Martha Stout gives a tip to her readers about what to look for when it comes to a sociopath or a psychopath. And she states that it's the pity play. She states that many people want some really vicious sign or some creepy thing. She said it's actually a pity play. It's that they are always looking for your sympathy. That's what Dr. Martha Stout states in The Sociopath Next Door, someone that's always playing the victim and always wants your sympathy. And that's all I hear people say about Jodi all the time, that she is always the victim. So put two and two together, it's certainly on my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess the outcome is she gets at minimum 4 years as well. And then it sounds like the actual term, the actual number of years of sentencing is going to be determined later. Anything else about what went on in the courtroom that you think is worth mentioning?
No, I think we've covered the most important parts. I think I wouldn't be surprised if Jodi gets more time than Ruby because of their statements, and also not just what their statements, but also what the judge has stated. He called Jodi out for not showing remorse. I can't wait to get these phone calls. By the way, someone asked me about FOIA requests and getting these phone calls. Yeah, we'll be on them. They won't be ready right away, but they certainly will be in about a month, and we'll be on it. But these phone calls that in the press conference after, the attorney stated that he had not heard these recorded jail calls that the judge brought up, that said that even when Jodi knew she was being recorded on phone calls, she did not show remorse or take responsibility for what she had done. And that makes her a risk factor.
But it's kind of dumb. You think she would do the least dumb thing to lead to the shortest sentence, and is calculating and is insincere and is whatever you can say about her. She's not acting in the smartest way for her own self-interest. And I mean, Jodi Hildebrandt, right?
No, it will show you. It shows you that clearly she's in distortion. And distortion
for her own benefit.
Right? Yeah. Distortion to Jodi can mean shame, and I think she just cannot admit that she's ever done anything wrong, and that will be her downfall in the end. And luckily, we found her kryptonite. She just cannot admit ever that she might be wrong.
Yeah. Well, there was a moment after I always want to make sure victims get represented. And there was a pretty powerful moment after when reporters are on the steps outside the courthouse and Adam Paul Steed commandeers the mic. I thought we could play a little clip of that. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right. So love and respect Adam Paul Steed, one of the many victims of Jodi Hildebrandt. This is what happened. We'll get him back on Mormon Stories right now. This was Adam Paul Steed's comments afterwards. Oh, wait a minute. Let me find the right clip. Hopefully this is it. Okay, one more. Here we go.
Hi there. Okay, we've got another interview.
Do you guys want to know who Jodi Hildebrandt is? Here, I'll answer your questions. He's her attorney. He can't answer them. My name's Adam Paul Steed, and if you guys want to know who Jodi Hildebrandt is, I'll answer tons of questions about her. I know my dad. Hey, Dad, come here. Come here. My dad has a file at home that's probably about 2,500 pages of records from court filings and just huge amount of documentation about Jodi Hildebrandt that we will share with everybody. I want you to know the same court that has ordered us not to share these documents is covering up this racket that Jodi Hildebrandt had with the Mormon Church in the 4th District Utah County Court. She abused my children the same way, almost, even in a different type of abuse. I think it could be argued worse. And that was 15 years ago. And I fought against Jodi Hildebrandt with my family and everybody to stop this monster of a lady. And Jodi went after me. She went after me, destroyed my life in the craziest way you could ever think of possible. Like, I was a victim of sexual abuse at Boy Scouts of America, Camp Little Lemhi in Idaho. My dad helped us stop a predator. You can read it in the national press and everything. We changed the laws of sexual abuse so victims could come forward. We got rid of the criminal and civil statute limitations. The Mormon Church knew who we were. And Elder Helam, Richard G. Helam, was he was the president of the First Quorum of the 70, the top probably executive functioning leader of the whole Mormon Church. And he sat with Jodi Hildebrandt as they destroyed my life in this court racket, like they've destroyed countless other people's lives. And they even had the gall to order my Mormon Stories thing where I brought some documentation off the internet saying that they didn't want me to say bad things to my children or in front of the children about my ex-wife. Well, if you're accused of sexual abuse by Jodi Hildebrandt, and if your ex-wife performed a falsification of sexual abuse, that professionals looked at the documentation and said, this is sexual abuse. This is sexual abuse. We have documentation for sexual abuse of my children by Jodi Hildebrandt and my ex-wife. And you know, this stuff was redacted in the Doppel paperwork. It was so horrible that it was redacted. And the courts just recently said I couldn't talk about my family or my ex-wife or anything, but if you have children, if your children were trained to think that your dad was a predator and a monster.
So I'm sorry, we came in a little bit late. Why is it that you wanted to be here?
Okay, so there are tons, and it's not Jodi Hildebrandt is the tip of the iceberg. The Mormon Church was doing this operation where they were using religious beliefs and they were using ethical therapists to enforce them, and it was an area of exploitation, and it was a horrific area. It was exploitation because it created horrible divorces that should have been normal divorces. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of families going through these courts, and Jodi was like an icon. Her doctrine. Okay, so here's the problem. Everybody.
So today it sounds like was a little bit of like justice for you too.
Oh, Jodi, yeah, Ruby Frank. When I saw Ruby Frank, I saw my ex-wife sitting there saying the exact same thing. That my ex-wife would have said the exact same thing Ruby Frankie said today, and a lot of other women would have said the same thing. You have no idea how many victims are out there that their minds have been messed up so much with this. The prosecutor said that he said that the children thought it was their fault. All of the adult men think it's their fault. All of the women think it's their fault. I have had countless emails and messages.
Sorry, what was your name?
I'm Adam Paul Steed. I'm the guy that got Jodi's license from Doppel removed. Well, my dad and mom get the credit. But and they said that the Doppel department said, we have evidence here for criminal charges against Jodi. This is 13 years ago. It's identical stuff. So I almost like fell over in the courtroom when I heard Jodi say that she loved those children. Jodi doesn't love children. Jodi's like Ted Bundy. In fact, one time I was in a
Do you feel that she should have a longer sentence than Ruby?
Jodi, here's the problem. Somebody hits a person and runs. That's like two variables, a car and someone running. They catch them. Jodi's got like 30 variables, including a huge issue with the Mormon church racketing. I mean, they're all ducking low and covering. In fact, I looked at an email, and I can show this to you guys. This is factual evidence, where it should have been a neutral person in the courts. Kelly Peterson, the guardian ad litem, when they were punishing me in the family custody courts, he said that my act to turn Jodi Hildebrandt in was an act of vengeance, and they took my kids away from me. Because I performed an act of vengeance. That's in this court was sitting there completely in bed with Jodi. They've done it. I talked to Doug Thayer's daughter. She saw relations. I mean, these aggressive attorneys working with Jodi, Commissioner Patton. All these people know about Jodi. The BYU Honor Code office before they kicked me out of school for being a whistleblower on child abuse, I guess. Jodi Hildebrandt went there and told them I was the most dangerous man she'd ever met in her lifetime. We have hundreds of pages of this stuff of Jodi Hildebrandt working with top church leaders to dispel me. I got kicked out of school my senior year. This lady, we've got all this documentation of how she talks, how she walks. Now, here's what I do want to say. I don't like Ruby Franke, but I don't know her. I just think you have to be a selfish person to fall for Jodi's stuff. She's got a certain kind of carrot that gets certain kind of people. But Ruby Franke would have never done any of this stuff if Jodi Hildebrandt hadn't been the mastermind and just completely created this. Ruby Franke's not dangerous in the sense she's not going to go out and do this to more kids, but Jodi Hildebrandt will. When we went to Doppel, and we went to Doppel ordered her to go through all this ethical stuff. She went through the whole thing with shining colors, and she turned around and did the same stuff again. I mean, even when she was teaching us that we were safe to come to her and stuff, she was abusing children at the same time with one hand and teaching a godliness with another hand.
So what's her motivation?
Jodi Hildebrandt had a weird relationship with my ex-wife. It was a dual relationship. It was bordering sexual in nature. I mean, she went through different women that made her look powerful and important. My ex-wife's dad was a Area 70 in the Mormon church. And Jodi Hildebrandt wanted power but I know her instincts. When you're in a pain and suffering, when you talk about something and she finds a way to hurt you, it makes her blush. It makes her feel euphoric. I've seen her act that way and look that way in the worst of circumstances. So I always compare Jodi Hildebrandt to Ted Bundy because nobody can figure out why a serial killer would kill people. Jodi Hildebrandt, she grows off of people's pain and destruction. And when she sat there and said she loved those kids, I almost fell out of my chair. The only thing her version of loving children is find a way to make them hurt more than anything possible. It's like an energy she feeds off of.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Yeah.
Dang, mic drop.
It's a little traumatic for me, so if I monologue, I'm sorry. Does anybody have a question?
Covered a lot.
We got a ton of documentation. That 4th District Court's got to be ducking their heads right now because I do want to say something. There's countless children out there that have been raised to believe their fathers are predators because of Jodi Hildebrandt. And the 4th District Court and other courts involved don't want to show they made mistakes. So who's going to help those children? Like, who's going to help them? Like, this is a court of public opinion. People need to find out the truth to go help all these children and help all these people come forward. And the fact that the court tried to silence me for being on the front edge of coming forward is just an example of how the same notorious people in power back then that allowed Jodi to do all this stuff are alive and thriving today. And if you give a damn about our children, you got to do the same thing I do and fight for what's true.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you, Adam. That was Adam Steed. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I was getting it through my IFB, hearing myself. That was Adam Steed, who claims to have been a victim of Jodi Hildebrandt, in a sense, comparing her to Ted Bundy. So really, really emotional testimony that we're hearing outside of the courthouse now. Bob, I'll send it back to you right now.
Man, Ted Bundy, like he dropped the mic, calls out the Mormon church, calls out the district court in Utah. He
Says if you care about kids, you should be listening. Boom. I was like, okay.
And I don't think I can get a cease and desist takedown letter for that, because I'm just playing what was played on national media. So I'm hoping I don't have to take this one down too. I am curious. So I'm grateful that he was willing to call it the Mormon church, the district court, Jodi Hildebrandt, call it like he sees it. A victim speaks. I was under the understanding that there was a court order silencing him. So the one thing about that that's really shocking to me is just sort of fear for his safety, knowing that the court has silenced him along with us being silenced to not let him speak. So do you have any thoughts on that? I guess you wouldn't maybe know, Lauren.
Well, no, I mean, I just spent an hour with him right before you and I jumped on. So I certainly asked. I think I can say this. He's certainly feeling empowered. I think that much is clear. And I think there's reason that he's starting to feel empowered. And I'll leave it at that. But yes, Adam met with me here. Again, I'm in St. George. So he met with me here and we went live together right before I jumped on here. And while I can't share everything, I can share that he's definitely, I'll just say it one more time, feeling empowered for many reasons.
Well, fortunately, you did an interview with Adam Paul Steed and you didn't receive a takedown cease and desist letter. It's an audio only interview. Is that right?
It is. And I think you want to know why I think is because throughout our interview, it's a 2-part interview, a very long interview on our channel. He kept saying, well, I got to save that for Mormon Stories.
Oh,
well, I got to save that one for Mormon Stories. So
it's not the full story. Yeah.
He certainly saved some things for Mormon Stories, but yes, our interview with him is still up.
But he got a lot of that in today. But do check out Hidden True Crime for one audio interview of Adam Paul Steed, along with an extended interview today. You guys can go right there after. Well, Lauren, this has been so great to have you. We have 4,766 people tuned into this live stream. It's crazy. I want to give you just a chance to give your final thoughts. Lauren, you're a gift to our community. You and your husband, John, Mathias, we love your coverage. Please, everyone, subscribe to Lauren and John. Like this episode, share it. Lauren, really quickly, how do people support you and John and your important work? And then please give us any closing thoughts you have.
Thank you, John. You can support our work at Hidden True Crime. That's our YouTube channel, or listening to our podcast as well, Hidden True Crime Podcast. Or we actually have a new channel now that is starting today, Hidden True Crime Trials, or HTC Trials. We appreciate everyone that follows us and subscribes. I think that we are definitely different than any true crime podcast because we truly try to get to the root, or those hidden motives and the hidden reasons behind the crimes, and we dig deep. My husband is a forensic and clinical psychologist, and I was a TV reporter for 10 years before starting this podcast. We're so grateful for you, John. I reached out to John. I reached out to you today, John, and asked if you would do this live, because I feel like when it comes to a crime like this, in order to dig deep, to get to the root of the issue, this needed Mormon Stories. So thank you for always be willing to talk about hard things. We really appreciate Mormon Stories, especially as we've covered the Daybell case, Jodi Hildebrandt, Tim Ballard, and others. Thank you for your safe space and your compassion and your platform that works to help so many.
Well, it's completely my honor. I adore you guys. I think we're all part of an important group of creators trying to bring health. Our goal within Mormon culture, within broader Christian culture, within American culture, we just want healing and growth. We want the judicial system to do better. We want people of faith to do better. We want the justice system. We just want better actors all around. And I think that's something that we share.
Absolutely. I will say too, I will be on News Nation later tonight on Banfield talking about the sentencing. And then my husband, John, and I, for our weekly hidden hour, of course, will be covering this Ruby Franke, Jodi Hildebrandt sentencing today. And so if you want the forensic and clinical psychologist take, join us Saturday night about this.
All right, Lauren, you're the best.
You're the best.
Come back soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, John.
Lauren. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Please do subscribe to this channel. Please like it. Please become a monthly donor at mormonstories.org. Click on the donate button. Your donations keep this possible, keep this alive. Please also support Hidden True Crime. Please leave your comments. Please share this episode wherever you can. And don't be a stranger. We want to thank Maven and Julia and Gerardo and Brooklyn for all they do on the Mormon Stories staff. And we want to thank all of you, our listeners and supporters, because we couldn't do this without you. Check back to Mormon Stories for more good stuff in the days, weeks, months ahead. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast and Hidden True Crime. Take care, everybody.